As the war in Ukraine drags on with no clear end in sight, troubling new accounts from Ukrainian prisoners of war, POWs, highlight severe disillusionment among the ranks. These testimonies shed light on the harsh realities faced by those conscripted into the military and underscore growing dissatisfaction with President Volodymyr Zelensky's leadership. Maxim Sergeevich Mucha, a soldier born on April 3, 1995, and serving in the 25th Brigade, 2nd Battalion, 7th Company, provided a detailed account of his experiences, painting a dire picture of the mobilization process.
They started taking people without asking, without anything, just taking them. I'm not saying this is the case for everyone, but I've seen a lot in videos. They told stories of people just going to work, being forcibly pulled out, restrained. They were forcibly taken. All their documents, phones, everything was taken.
Mucha described a chaotic and distressing situation where nearly 80 to 90% of those in his training were forcibly conscripted.
There were very few who went voluntarily. There was hope that they would hear us. We already said 1 or 2 days we were there. We felt the tension. My task was to sit on the evacuation vehicle, to evacuate the wounded or help. And I was sitting, hoping that they would take us, that soon they would just evacuate the wounded and then take us.
This frustration is compounded by the lack of clear communication and support from the Ukrainian government. Mucha shared that his group, tasked with evacuating the wounded, faced an uncertain future.
My task was to sit on the evacuation vehicle, to evacuate the wounded or help. And I was sitting, hoping that they would take us, that soon they would just evacuate the wounded and then take us. But when we moved to another location, it became clear that our people weren't there. There was no certainty anymore. I asked when they might pick us up to wait, 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 days.
Mucha's account reflects broader sentiments of disillusionment among the troops. He lamented the failure of the government to provide adequate support and the stark contrast between the privileged lives of politicians and the hardships faced by ordinary soldiers.
They live well, steal, live comfortably, don't refuse anything. Those deputies who were at the table, they sent their sons away. Well, what I heard is that they sent them abroad a long time ago. Well, it's probably all Western interests. About the war that the US started it first, with other countries before us, before Ukraine. They were the first. They also provided ammunition, gave financial aid.
Another poignant testimony came from an unnamed soldier who described his experiences with the mobilization process and the impact of the war on his life.
I was mobilized. I was on my way to work when a patrol from the Territorial Recruitment Center, TCC, came up to me and handed me a draft notice. In my platoon, there are 29 people. In the company, 94. The majority are indeed mobilized.
The soldier expressed deep frustration with President Zelensky, highlighting the stark contrast between his previous life and the current situation.
Zelensky, I didn't vote for him and didn't want him to be president. But we lived well, that is, before the war, before the full-scale invasion. I lived well, earned money. Well, not badly, actually. There were some plans for life. The same goes for most people. Now for some, it's not just that life is ruined. Some have even lost their lives. It's very frightening.
These personal accounts underline a growing crisis within the Ukrainian military, where inadequate preparation and disorganization are leading to mounting frustrations. The testimonies highlight the need for urgent reforms and a reassessment of how the Ukrainian government is managing its war effort. Andrei Shulgin, a recently captured Ukrainian soldier, recounted a nightmare scenario that began with a rushed and negligent enlistment process. According to Shulgin, after a cursory medical examination and minimal training, he and his fellow soldiers were hastily deployed to the front lines. The lack of proper preparation became evident as they endured severe conditions in a makeshift tent, subsisting on dry rations for an entire week.
I was brought to the enlistment office. I spent the first night there, and the next night they took me to another enlistment office. From there, we went straight to training. I didn't go through any commissions or anything, but everywhere it was written, year, year, year. That's it. We were told we were going to the Sumy region, but then we spent the night somewhere in the forest, in some kind of forest. We only passed by 3 or 4 houses. It was more like a hamlet, not really a hamlet. I remember we passed them. Then we lived in the forest for about a week in a tent, which was covered with a tarpaulin. Under that tarpaulin, we survived on military rations for about a week.
The situation deteriorated further when their Striker infantry fighting vehicle, IFV, was ambushed. Shulgin's account of fleeing from the explosion of a grenade behind him highlights the extreme peril and disarray faced by Ukrainian troops.
Under that tarpaulin, we survived on military rations for about a week. Then all the strikers gathered and we were loaded up again. They took us back into the forest. They told our commander some kind of grid or something. They took us there, but we didn't make it, because our striker was hit by a grenade and the engine stalled. And that's it. Then we started scattering like mice because there was nowhere to go. A grenade exploded right behind me.
Shulgin's story continues with a desperate escape from the battlefield. This desperate flight led him to discover a leaflet offering the option to surrender, which he ultimately chose in the face of relentless enemy fire and disorganized Ukrainian leadership.
I fell to the ground and crawled away as much as I could. Then I propped myself against a tree and started running. There was shooting and explosions. Anyway, I ran away as far as I could see, caught my breath a bit, then ran further. They kept shooting and shooting, I don't know. I accidentally found a piece of paper. I looked at it. It said, "Offer to surrender." I decided to surrender.
These first-hand accounts of suffering and disarray stand in stark contrast to the narrative often portrayed by Zelensky's administration, shedding light on the grim realities faced by Ukrainian troops on the ground.